get everything can happen, you know. So it's going to be a tough leg.
We've got the radar off the rig at the moment, getting a little bit of love. Busy, our super fixer, is going to bring it back to life.
Like, what have you guys been talking about? Where is it? It's gonna come. Keep your head down. Do you hear me now? Who's listening? This is yacht racing, not as we know it. Listen up, your technology can set us free, but it comes with the fee. Yeah, it ain't about you and me. It's easy to track it, to know. Don't need to bust. Well, it's always fun going fast, but the cold makes it worse.
There she is. Fantastic day, Kay Bourne. Speechless.
This is for you, Magnus.
The decisive thing for us was the 24-hour record and getting ourselves from fifth up with the leaders, and that set us up for the win.
Welcome to the Volvo Ocean Race 2014-15 and welcome to the Brazilian city of Itajaí. It's race day. The start of leg 6 is just minutes away. 5,000 miles north from here, back into the northern hemisphere. The warm beaches of the state of Santa Catarina have been a welcome relief for the sailors who arrived here via the Southern Ocean and Cape Horn on leg 5. Yesterday, ex-Brazilian footballer and two-time World Cup winner Cafu was in town to watch the racing, and just before leaving the dock on board Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, he showed Ian Walker a few skills. Brazilian multiple Olympic gold medalist and Volvo Ocean Race winner Torben Grail jumped on board Team SCA as a guest moments before the start of the import race yesterday. It was a light wind affair with almost every boat in the fleet leading at some stage in the race, but at the end, a new import winner emerged as Team Brunel took their first win, which put them at the top of the Import Series leaderboard. Behind Brunel, the fleet was stacked up to cross the line in the space of less than a minute. But today's focus is back onto the open ocean once again. With the boats assembled, repaired and loaded with food and stores, the fleet is ready to head north to Newport, Rhode Island.
I'm Niall Mine, and joining me for commentary today is Richard Mason, four-time competitor in the Volvo Ocean Race and now Team SCA shore manager. Well, 5 legs down, 4 to go, Abu Dhabi out in the lead by 7 points, but you'd be wrong to be thinking it's all played out.
Everything to play for from here on in. I mean, the points are close. You've got some very short, intense legs coming up, or they're getting shorter and shorter. Still some pretty tough ones though as well, with the transatlantic coming up. I mean, that's no champagne sailing going across there. You can still get anything, but as the boats get closer to home, they're going to be racing harder, pushing harder, and there's an element of confidence that'll come out of the Southern Ocean with the crews as well. You know, they're over the hump, they've been through the tough stuff, and they're just going to be pushing that much more.
Well, leg 5 is always billed as the tough, challenging leg, and it didn't disappoint, did it? Broken mast, broken sails, and your boat, a broken rudder.
Yeah, well, it was a tough one for those of us ashore as well to watch. So it was a lot of damage through the fleet. Of course, we had Dongfong down in Ushuaia having to get the mast changed. But all the boats are back together now. They're in one piece and they're ready to get back out there on the racetrack. And a tough leg, but looking ahead, we're all together again, time to get racing again.
How about the sailors? Because they've had 2 weeks here in Itajaí to recover from those pretty grueling conditions.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there were some very puffy, red-eyed sailors that came in here that would look pretty tired, but they're back up on their feet. They've enjoyed plenty of good Brazilian culture, lots of meat, and no, I think they're all raring and ready to go.
Well, let's have a look at how leg 5 has affected the scoreboard.
Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing hold the lead in the overall standings, and going into leg 6, they are the only team to have won 2 ocean legs. Dongfeng started leg 5 tied in first, but after breaking their mast 200 miles from Cape Horn and retiring, they handed Abu Dhabi a 7-point buffer. Team Brunel hold on to third, but only narrowly. They need a good one here to light the fuse under their campaign. The big news in recent days has been Mafre's 2-point penalty for unauthorised boat work on leg 5 in the Southern Ocean. But on the water, the team is starting to gel, as is America's Alvi Medica, who are just 1 point behind Team Brunel. Team SCA struggled on leg 5 and were punished by tough conditions. For them, this more tactical leg could offer a chance to take some places and turn potentially into a result. At just over the halfway mark in this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race, the skippers shared their thoughts on the racing and what's to come.
There will be a lot of pressure on Abu Dhabi. They know they are in the lead, they have a very comfortable lead, but we know this race is not finished until somebody is really secured having the lead. So in that sense, as well as how the legs are going, like especially this upcoming leg, a lot can happen. Even Abu Dhabi can be laying under a cloud, and all of a sudden the next day boats are 50, 60 or even worse, more miles ahead.
We've got 45% of the points left, and what that last leg shows is how easy you can lose a lot of points. So, you know, next leg it could be us or anybody else. So I think for us nothing's really changed. We just try and keep doing the same thing.
We are not going to change the way we are sailing. I mean, we are going to do the best, and we'll see. Like as I say, Jan Walker, both the race is not finished. A lot of things can happen, and what happened to us can happen to the other one also. So.
I think generally we've been getting better every single leg and improving in different parts of our game. So I think every time we set out on a new leg, we feel a little bit more confident, and I think that's definitely the case here as well. Much like these guys said, I think we're going to try to continue to do a lot of the same stuff, and as the race progresses, get better in all those areas, and hopefully the results improve as well.
We had quite a few interesting challenges, including hitting unidentified floating objects, a nice Chinese dive. When we hit the object and broke our rudder off, we called that a Brazilian tack. Anyway, we ended up putting the boat flat on both sides, with the A3 up. So I think the girls have done a lot of things together. We've done a lot of things that we've never done before in our lives.
It's a big leg, over 5,000 miles, which is going to be a little bit of everything. No? We've done this before to Boston, and last time to Miami was a bit different, and it's a leg which is going to be a little bit of everything. Side winds at the beginning, all the coast of Brazil, and then doldrums. And I think even if the doldrums are not too bad in this area, I think as the fleet is sailing today all together and so close, I think it's going to be very important to go exit the doldrums in the head, no?
While the other skippers are about to race, Chris Nicholson updated us on his campaign's effort to repair their boat.
It's still on schedule for Team Vestas Wind to return to the race in Lisbon. Hopefully this week, the boat will be starting to get some undercoat on it. So it's one of those parts where you actually, you're getting to see things done. But I guess what's going on behind the scenes and inside of the boat is all the complex fit out of the hydraulics and the electrical. So that's about to start up and ramp up. So it's on track, but it's you certainly wish it was well prior to the race, where if you miss your deadline by a day or two or even a week, it's not critical. Whereas if we miss it by a day, it is critical. So the pressure's on everybody, but it is also going well at the moment.
A Brazilian send-off is like no other, and as the dancers led the sailors through the crowds, news that nearly 300,000 people had come into the race village in this stopover underlines the success of the local party atmosphere. Team SCA arrived with crew bags for 3 weeks at sea. So too did Mafre skipper Xabi Fernandez, while Ian Walker was in happy form as he walked through the crowds, a chink of light at the top of the leaderboard giving this skipper a reason to believe. Dongfeng's guest Brazilian footballer Mauricio Santos posed for the cameras while new leg haircuts were revealed to the crowds. And British comedian Dom Jolly was tooling up to climb Abu Dhabi's mast. It's a serious business 30 metres in the air. Paintings were exchanged and then national flags, signifying the handover from Itajaí to Newport before blessing the fleet. Di Cafari had a big hand for the Brazilian crowd support. It was returned from the dockside as model Aline Jabor reflected that in a couple of hours' time, she will be diving off the back of the boat and into the South Atlantic Ocean. Charlie Enright stepped aboard in a serious mood. Next step ashore will be on home soil. While over on Mafre, local hero Andre Fonseca was savouring the home crowd send-off. Team Brunel set off buoyed up by their import race win yesterday. The two Chinese sailors on Dongfeng race team had a message for their hosts, but getting back into the race will be a welcome return for the French-Chinese crew. And then it was time for the race leaders to say goodbye. The flags on the mast underlining their dominance as race leader, IWC speed record holder and winner of the leg into Brazil. The send-off was complete, the boats were off the dock, and the business of racing from Brazil north to America was about to get underway. On the water is Volvo Ocean Race CEO Knut Frostad. Knut, a bit more wind than we had yesterday?
A little bit more wind, not a lot to be honest. It's very, very light here, still some swell, but at least the wind is from what I would say the right direction. It's an onshore breeze, and we had to wait all day for that yesterday. So a little bit of a hope. I think Bill O'Hara, the race director, has decided to go for the start, and this is an offshore leg, so you have to go, and the sailors are going to sit there for a while, I think. And I have a new guest with me today, Mike Golding, a famous single-handed sailor, who I think is the only man in the planet who has finished on the podium in the round the world race without the keel, because he lost the keel just before the finish. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. We're going to have some good talks with Mike after the start, and also compare a little bit of how it is to leave a start like this alone and how it is to leave it with the crew. But no, it's fairly light behind us. The boats are very close to the start line right now, and just a few minutes left, and you can see that there's not much speed in it.
Well, thanks, Knut. Just before we get to the start, let's take a look at the skippers of this year's Volvo Ocean Race. Charles Cordrelia shared the leaderboard until the Southern Ocean claimed the Frenchman's mast on leg 5. He needs to regroup and recreate previous form. Sam Davies led an experienced team through a challenging Southern Ocean, but she will be hoping this leg will give a chance to prove they can beat their rivals. Bauer Becking tops the import leaderboard but needs to convert some leading positions into leg wins. Charlie Enright led the fleet round Cape Horn, and the young American team has been improving. He would love to lead the fleet into home territory on this leg. Double Olympic medalist Ian Walker has managed to ease clear of the pack on the leaderboard, but knows that 45% of the points are still to be won and is not easing up. Chris Nicholson has not been a sailing participant in the race since his shipwreck on leg 2, but repairs to his boat will see him back in the race in 2 legs' time. Xabi Fernandez once again takes on the role of skipper of the Spanish boat as Mafre continue to improve. This team is on form on the water and is moving the right way up the leaderboard. Well, there you can see the race control boat in the middle of your picture. 1 minute 20 seconds to go on the countdown. Richard, a little bit more breeze. It looks good for the start.
Yeah, looking a little bit more breezy than yesterday, but there's not a lot more. There's an interesting combination of sails up there. You're using the J1s for a bit more manoeuvrability. Some of the boats going straight to the code zeros to just get that horsepower and sail area up.
And we can see a real bunch at the committee boat end. Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, potentially they're in a dangerous position there. They've got Mafre just beneath them, and Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing doesn't have a lot of rights there. There's a little bit of tide on the water, and if they get pushed the wrong side of the race control boat, and at the moment, as I can see it, they are going over the top of the race committee. So hopefully they're going to be able to clear the pack and start well, but this looks like a very bad start for them. Also, as you were mentioning, slightly different sail configuration. Team SCA, they've got the jib up. Dongfeng, they followed suit with the jib, while everybody else with the code 0. 30 seconds to go now for the start, and it's looking pretty grim for Abu Dhabi Ocean Racer. The skipper, Ian Walker's got it all to do.
Yeah, that's a really tough position to come back from. You're going to have to come down and recross the line from there.
Team SCA just meters away from the line as the pack lines up to begin. Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing over the line and over outside the ends of the race committee boat. They are going to have a very hard time coming into this run as the final seconds count down as leg 6 gets underway here in Itajaí.
A fantastic start there by SCA. You couldn't have got any closer to the line.
Very light winds at the moment. This is where that tricky setting up of the boat starts coming in. It's going to be very tricky for these boats to come clear, but Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, they've got a lot to do. Canute, you're on the water. That start looking pretty bad for Ian Walker.
Yeah, I think the most tricky thing is that you have no steerage. I mean, he has very, very little speed. So it's very difficult to actually maneuver anywhere. You can't really do much. And he has to be careful about the committee boat, not to hit the committee boat. But he basically has to get down to the line. He obviously has to give way to all the other boats. And he's in a very, very difficult position. But it's not like the fleet is going anywhere in a hurry. You know, like no one is going to disappear over the horizon here. And they're hardly moving across the line. But, you know, this is offshore sailing. This can happen around the world. This can happen anytime on the lake. And they have to be good at this as well.
Well, as we can see from the helicopter shot, Ian Walker having to put the bow up, having to turn almost head to wind to clear from a very aggressive move almost from Mafre and Dongfeng, just trying to punch clear, and those three boats getting involved into a bit of a scrap.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and like Knut said, it's all about manoeuvrability here, and these guys have got very little steerage and control over the boat, so you've got to be extremely careful when you get it this close in these type of conditions, because it's actually the waves that have more control over the boat than you do. So, and from that position there, just looking at Mafre and Abu Dhabi, Abu Dhabi has to stop, let Mafre clear away from them, then they have to dip back and come back to the line. So they still haven't started this leg.
And if you haven't sailed boats like this, it's basically the boat is parked up like a car. You turn the steering wheel, nothing happens. You need to be going forward for the boat to turn. So Ian Walker here, he's going to have to stop and then get moving even before he gets steerage back.
Well, that's absolutely what he's doing here. In fact, you can see the guys pushing the mainsail out the other side. What they're trying to do here is actually sail backwards. So
that's a gutsy move to see.
That's a new one.
That's when you know that all your chips are down and you've just got to do something different.
Yeah, that's not a commonly seen manoeuvre in the Volvo Ocean Race. He's just looking to get some steerage and get backwards there. The other thing that could be happening is that someone may have seen that they have a plastic bag or something fouled underneath one of the foils underneath the boat, and by sailing backwards you can clear this off. But I think this is mostly just about trying to get back down to the line. You'll see them back the jib now and try and pull the bow down and start sailing back across the line there.
Well, as Canute said, there's not a lot of breeze at the start of this race. The fleet is not sailing over the horizon. They're not vanishing away from Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing. So if they can clear the line, they've got to sail back to the start line, dip the line completely with every part of their boat before rejoining the race. So they've got a lot to do, but no one's disappearing yet.
No, absolutely not. I mean, and we've got to get round the course here, but they won't be enjoying this at all. It's not a nice way to start, that's for sure.
Well, Canute, you're on the water, and we know we've got 3 weeks to go before we get to Newport, but these races have come down to very small distances when we've come down here, and I'm just wondering, how important will this start be for Abu Dhabi?
Well, that really depends, because if they're sailing into more breeze further offshore, this could be it. And I was just talking to Mike here about different offshore starts in the past. I still remember we had a start in Cape Town in '97, where the whole fleet could see Cape Town City the next morning. And then 2 boats managed to sneak away in absolutely no wind, and we're hundreds and hundreds of miles ahead of the fleet in a few days. So, Mike, have you experienced anything like this here in Brazil?
Absolutely the same. Rio de Janeiro, but the other end at the finish. Getting to Rio de Janeiro and then having a complete stoppage and watching all the other boats that you'd fought so long and hard to get ahead of start to come over the horizon and just stop exactly next to you. So then from there on inwards it's a little bit random. But right now these guys are punching out. They are moving very slowly, and the reality is this could split the fleet.
Oh, well, I'm just wondering, Canute, when the tide is going to start to have an effect, because as we saw yesterday, the breeze comes down and the tide gets more and more important. Is it starting to pull the boats?
Well, I think the tide here is very close to land as well. I mean, it's very affected by the river coming out of Itajaí, and I think the guys will try to head offshore because there is more breeze offshore, and staying here is no gain. So I'm just with Alvimerica now, and Alvimerica is starting to fill the sails a little bit. There's definitely some pressure in their sails. I see the guys looking up and talking a bit about the trim there, and they're definitely filling that big code 0, which actually needs a bit of wind to fill. I mean, when you see they have the big sails up and sailing with it, it means they have pressure. The girls on SCA are still sailing with a jib, and obviously just about now thinking, I think, about rolling out that code 0. But just the fact that you can fill a big sail is a very good sign, and I can feel the wind. Can you feel it, Mike? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of breeze here.
It's definitely coming in. It is only a few knots, but it's enough to start them rolling.
And you feel for Abu Dhabi and Ian Walker and his guys. I mean, that's terrible. It's the worst thing in the planet, because you know that the guys in front of you are going to sail slowly into more breeze offshore. And what is now 10 boat lengths can quickly become 100, can become 1,000 boat lengths. So, yeah, you never know. This could be it. This could be the race. This could be the leg. You never know.
Well, as Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing clear the start line and finally get underway, let's have a little bit of a look at how this leg starts. We begin in Itajaí with an import race section just outside the mouth of the river. From the start line, the fleets are going to be racing a sausage course, up and down first of all, straight up to Mark 1, round to port, and then back down to the bottom of your screens before going back out once again. From there, the next half of the race is a triangle. Out towards the beaches, round the Mark 4, round it to port before coming in back again to that starting area. Once through the start line for the final time, they can then continue on their way. 5,000 nautical miles to go before they reach Newport, Rhode Island. So quite a long, quite a challenging leg, and it all begins with a bit of a drift off before you can really get into these big breezes that we'll see, further up the coast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your first move is to try and get east and into easterly trade winds, which bring you up the coast of Brazil, and you're mostly on the wind as you come up there. Of course, then the next thing is to cross the doldrums, but you're far enough west that the doldrums don't have a bigger effect as they do when you come on the first leg coming down the other way. And then you've got to sort of wiggle your way up through the Bermuda Triangle, which is a bit of make sure you get through there, and then approaching into the colder waters around Cape Hatteras, and then approaching your way up to Newport, which at the moment is still very cold. So lots of changes in temperature, weather conditions, very foggy in Newport at the moment. So it's going to be a pretty tough 5,000 miles.
And for the sailors on the water at the moment, all of that starts with these tiny little movements, just trying to get the breeze. What are the sailors looking for on the water at the moment? We've got dark patches, we've got tides, but what are the telltale signs?
Oh, absolutely anything at the moment. I mean, basically, obviously they've got to go to somewhere, so you've got to keep pointing in that direction wherever the next mark is, and you'll be looking for just those little darker patches, little puff, trying to position yourself one way or the other. Looks like we've got an extra crew member there on SCA at the moment. But you'll just be fighting your way into it, just looking for anything to get the boat moving, really.
Well, how much gear is on board some of these boats? Because yesterday we saw them sail around the import course. Now they've got to do something similar, but of course they're actually going out on the water for about 3 weeks. How much extra stuff do they need to take?
Well, there's a lot of extra stuff on board there. We went through it all this morning, and it's upwards of this is 550 kilos of spares that goes on board, spares and food and what have you. And we still carry the same number of sails, but for an import race you're actually allowed to take sails off for the day. So if you don't think you're going to need them, you can leave those behind, whereas that's all on board as well. So considerably more weight, which actually sinks the boats down and slows them down a little bit as well. So it's just that much harder to get them moving in conditions like today. Very glassy conditions there out on the water.
A very interesting picture there from the helicopter, because what you can see just over onto the horizon, those darker clouds, and potentially as those darker clouds roll in, we might start to see a little bit of breeze, and every single boat here, it's going to be eyes out, just looking for the breeze as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been these clouds. Yesterday we saw that sucking effect as the clouds came offshore. But unfortunately today, as you can see in the background here, there's a lot of cloud cover inland, which means that it's very difficult for any sort of sea breezes to establish themselves and get going. So what we're dealing with here is generally a very light airs racetrack for quite some time.
Well, let's see if Canute and Mike can see any breeze down there. Where do you think the breeze is going to fill in from, guys?
I think we still believe that it's an offshore game, because looking back at Abu Dhabi on the start line there is more. You can feel more wind here on the water. It's definitely something for Alve Medica and SCA. They have a little bit of pressure here, and obviously this is not over yet, because you're going to do these 2 laps, one sausage and one triangle. They're going to do, and that's going to bring them back into the difficult light years, Mike.
Yeah, I think it still could change around, exactly because of that, because of the fact they're doing the sausage and the triangle. That could well turn it all around. Abu Dhabi are absolutely stopped back there.
You feel for them, don't you?
It's terrible, frustrating, but the reality of sailing is that these times when it's very, very light, this is where you're having to concentrate and work extremely hard. It may not look like it, but the guys are having to concentrate, move about the boat really slowly, do the minimum to upset the sail plan.
Well, we just received a message here from Mark Cavell, who was Ian Walker's Olympic crew, and Mark was saying that Ian really, he loves to be ahead. He feels most dangerous when he's behind, and he will be beating himself up and even more determined to catch up now. This is just the start that he didn't want, and while everybody's stuck still and no one's really sailing away, it's just going to take him an age to close that distance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a psychological thing for just getting out of here, but of course, there's an awfully long way to sail, 5,000 miles to go. But if you can just get your nose out and get cracking, but it probably has more effect as you get towards sort of the latter parts of this import race course, because obviously right now as you go around the mark you're going to head back towards your opposition, so if they're in no wind you're going to end up in the same situation pretty soon. But if when they're leaving here you've got boats that are stuck behind in no wind and you're extending out, getting into those easterlies, you just nose your way into it. Like Knut said in previous races, that can extend out an awful long way.
Now, inform me as to what's exactly going on here, because we've got a great race situation happening here. But why have we got? Oh, look at that! There's the crowds out and ready to watch the water. As we mentioned earlier, nearly 300,000 people have come out to support the race here. And right from the moment where the boats arrived in Itajaí to now when they're leaving, everybody in the city has come out to cheer this race on.
Yeah, the race village has been completely abuzz the whole time. It's been it opens at 2 o'clock every day, and at 2 o'clock the place would just fill up, and quite often we've been working late into the nights on the boats, and it's just been people. There's an enormous amount of interest, and they're very engaged. They really want to be a part of the race. It's a great place to come to.
Why is it that we're seeing some of these boats sailing with the Code Zero and some with the J1, the jib sail? Because the Code Zero is a bigger sail, and sort of instinct tells you the bigger sail, the better sail. But some of the sailors here are electing to say, no, it's too light for the Code Zero.
Yeah, basically, it's what Nick was talking about, Nico, yesterday, that at this point, when you have the J1 up, it's actually a drifter. And you can either have the J1 up or you can have a partially furled Zero, and all that's doing is really, as the boat's flapping around, it's a smaller sail and it's helping to waggle you forward. So you can only really use the Code Zero if it's setting, or certainly setting for the better part, because otherwise it's just hanging there and it's more drag. So the smaller sail will sit as you flap and sort of set and drive you forward. It's almost sort of as if you were ooching your way, using the waves to help you ooch along through the water.
Well, Knut, do you think the Code Zero is working, or do you think the J1's the sail to go for today?
Oh, I think right now I think they have nothing. We're just next to Dongfeng here. Dongfeng in Chinese actually means the wind from the east, and I think that's what Charles Quadrillier is looking for here. There is nothing. I mean, basically the boat here has parked up, and when you're parked up and you're not moving forward, if you put a too big sail up, that sail is actually going to slow the boat down, because it's going to start banging into the rig. And it's actually going to create a motion that's going to make the boat stop. So a tiny small sail is normally the best way to sort of get you slowly moving, and also sense for the helmsman where is the wind coming from. Because sometimes it's all even difficult to sense where the breeze is coming from. But Mike, you have done many offshore starts. Mike Golding here with us today. And what do you prefer? A heavy air start, lots of wind, or a very light start like today if you had to choose?
Certainly not a light start like today. I'd prefer not a heavy day, but a moderate day where you can just steady start and get into your rhythm. This is going to be enormously frustrating for the teams, but it's in the end it's the same for everyone here, and they're just having to fight through it.
I think this is very typical. I mean, we always get this question when you're offshore sailors that, what do you hate the most? And normally people expect you to say the big storms, but why you hate the light airs is because you have no control. I mean, you kind of feel you lose the control of your own destiny, and that's painful.
That's right, and you can see the boats are heeling over, and they've got their keels canted to leeward, trying to reduce their wetted air. They're doing everything to try and make these boats move.
Off there we can see from the virtual eye the layout of the course at the moment. Alvi Medica in the lead, followed by Team SCA, and they've just managed to drift slightly ahead. Perhaps these two boats just catching that little bit of breeze. Behind them, Mafre, Team Brunel, and Dongfeng Race Team struggling to clear the start line. Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing a good way back as well. So while we haven't got a lot of breeze, we do have a leader.
Yeah, we do have a leader, but not by much there. It looks like there's barely a boat length between them, but pretty hard place for SCA to be in at the moment, because again you're going to be sitting in any dirty air that there is behind Alpha Medica, and when there is no wind, I mean, it's any sort of slight puff you get, you don't want that to be in disturbed air, so that's a bit tricky. But just looking at the speedo here, got a glimpse of it on Brunel. We're pretty close to having the hard-boiled eggs up there. That's when you see 0-0, the helmsman's nightmare, when you get 0.0 on the boat speed. So commonly referred to as the boiled eggs. If you've got the boiled eggs up, it's frustration city.
But it's not surprising to see these sailors working so hard, because while we do talk about 5,000 miles to go on this leg, the margins that these boats have won and lost in this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race has been incredibly small. I mean, we really are talking very, very, very small, tiny moments. So we're only a third of the way into this first leg of this import section, but they are going to be fighting for every little metre. On leg 1, the winning margin was 12 minutes, 16 minutes on leg 2, a comparatively colossal 3 hours on leg 3, and then leg 4, 4 minutes, and 32 minutes coming in here into Brazil. So, I mean, this is almost unheard of.
Oh, they're phenomenal statistics. I mean, in the past, we had days and weeks. I remember legs where I'd flown home and you'd watch other boats finishing on TV. You know, it's the close nature of this race is just unbelievable, and the finishing times. If we actually looked at sort of elapsed times across the fleet, you would be staggered as to, that's a cumulative time for each leg, how close these boats actually would be in time after sailing such an enormous distance.
Well, out in the water at the moment, we've got a little bit of action here, because Alvi Medica, they are the leeward boat. Team SCA are rolling over the top of them to windward. And important to remember that yesterday, Team SCA were dealt a penalty, a port and starboard. The jury decided that they didn't keep clear. And when it gets light like this, and you are trying to pass another boat, and you put yourself in a position that you can't maneuver from, you might get another penalty. So, Canute, you're on the water. I'm wondering, it's looking a little bit close between these two.
Well, I think I think it's still enough distance. But the most dangerous thing in these conditions is that you lose your maneuverability, you lose your speed, and then basically you can't get anywhere. And I think the situation yesterday with SCA and Brunel was that SCA probably realized it a bit late, and by the time they realized that this could happen, they had nowhere to go because they couldn't turn the boat. They were just not moving. And looking at Dongfeng right now, we were just discussing they're actually going backwards. So they're going backwards towards the start line. That's a painful experience, Mike.
No, unfortunately, there's a swell coming in towards the beach, and that swell is just pushing the boat backwards. And that's tough times. But the others do seem to be holding their own, and there's a tiny little bit of weight behind the boat, but it is small. It's pretty desperate right now.
It's interesting that Alvi Medica is still keeping their big Co-Zero up there, because normally that shouldn't work. It really shouldn't work, and you can see that SCA have kind of started to pass them. And I think they're making a little mistake there with that big Co-Zero, because you can see how the sail is not filling and it's actually banging into the rig. And that motion, we know that's the motion that really stops the boat completely, while SCA at least have the sail hanging away from the rig. So any little puff of wind will actually make you go forward.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the big overlapping sails, they just get sucked back into the mainsail as the mainsail's moving in the waves, so it kind of doesn't work. I was surprised it worked as well as it did for Alva Medica, but right now SCA look like they're steadily making their way past.
When you are racing in these conditions, I mean, if you have to do a start now in Mokka 60s and you're completely on your own, how would you set the boat up?
Yeah, pretty similar. You'd use your J1 and you'd use a smaller non-overlapping sail. Maybe if you have it, maybe you'd have a spinnaker staysail, which is a very, very light sail. and you try and use that as a drifter. But we don't have dedicated sails for these conditions, just like the Volvo Ocean Race boats. They're not dedicated sails from these conditions. If you had those, they'd be another sail in the inventory, but they'd be a very, very super light, non-overlapping sail.
Well, as the helicopter pans round, you can see every single boat almost sitting upright, no real breeze in there. But very important to remember here, Richard, that on these legs, as these boats sail across the equator, they sail into the doldrums, we're going to see conditions like this. Well, only we're not going to see it because they're going to be offshore. So this gives us a little bit of a glimpse to see that nailing these conditions, this could be sort of race-winning skills that they're practicing.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember a particular leg where we sailed up we went across the equator and we were sailing up to India, and we were right alongside another boat, and we turned 100 metres into 3 days because we just caught one cloud, and it was 100 metres, and catching that cloud or missing it, zipped round the side of it, hung in the back of a minuscule amount of breeze for long enough to edge our way out of it and disappeared over the horizon. And of course that can go against you as well, so anything you can do here can help you out going ahead.
And of course, with the boats this close together, as they're adjusting their sails and adjusting their equipment, they've got a little bit of a chance now to see how those adjustments carry out next to the other teams. They can test things. Is that working? Is that not working? It's a race, but it's also a little bit of a chance just to maybe compare a few settings. And Knut, you're on the water, and I'm just wondering, did you expect the Volvo Ocean Race this year to be as tight as it is on the water, with boats crossing each other in the middle of the ocean?
I expected it to be close with everyone having similar boats, but I at the same time I'm surprised how close they've stayed throughout the whole legs. We even had leg into Brazil here where there wasn't any catch-up scenario really, but they still finished very, very close, and they kind of like it. It's becoming a tactical element as well to always have something to gauge yourself against. Very funny here, just looking at Rob Greeno here, was waving to the helicopter, trying to wave the helicopter closer, and the downdraft from the helicopter is the most windy spot on the whole water here, and I just counted 6 helicopters before, so there's a lot of helicopters in the air, and they can get one closer, then that's going to help them.
Knut, do you think anyone would gain at this point by having somebody up the rig looking for wind?
I think they would. The tricky thing is quite a bit of swell here, so it's not a really pleasant place to be up there. And I think that right now they're so close to that first mark. I mean, it's very, very close. In a normal circumstances, that would be like a couple of minutes away. But so it's not so much to do for them. They cannot really change size. I think you'll see more of that after they leave the last turning mark, and they're going to make some bigger calls about hiking the coast or trying to work offshore. Then you'll see more of it for sure. But I know some of the teams have some meteorologists on land. I just spoke to Marcel van Christ, who used to be a famous navigator in this race, and he's working for Ian Walker, and he told me he took a Volvo XC60 and drove up to one of the hills just above the race course to actually sort of get a good look with binoculars and trying to see it from as high as possible. And he was also talking about getting up in a helicopter later and fly out, but now obviously now it's too late for him to give any information, so he was sitting up there up to the 5-minute gun and probably talking to Ian Walker, and then they lose that opportunity.
Well, as we keep waiting for the breeze, there is one boat on the course at the moment that seems to have found some. Team SEA rolled over the top of Alvi Medica with their J1, and they are starting to stretch a little bit of a lead. They're getting near the halfway mark on this first leg. So any ideas, Richard? What is your team doing?
Well, it's certainly impressed with the position they managed to manoeuvre themselves out of there. They came off the hip of Alpha Medica, which is virtually impossible in these sort of conditions, so that was very nice. But I think there was a function of the J1 versus the Code Zero, because another thing that sort of happens is that there's a gap between the J1 and the mainsail, and you want that to be as wide as possible in light conditions so the air can go through there, because that's actually what, as it accelerates through there, that's what generates a lift on the boats, and off they go as it moves over the sails. And of course, if you've got a great big Code Zero there that's not setting in front of it, it closes that gap completely, so no air can get through there. So it's all about sort of a combination of doing this ooching that I've been talking about, and just trying to get anything you possibly can out of the boat to get moving forward.
Well, as you can see from the shots, there is quite a large swell, and we saw this having an effect yesterday. Every single time one of these waves would come in, the bow would lift up and smash back down, and that's pretty challenging conditions to sail through.
Absolutely. I mean, it's brutal because you fight like hell for 2 or 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden, boom, you hit a wave and you lose the whole lot, and you've got to start all over again. So we're just looking at Brunel there, super light, but there's that gap that I'm talking about. You can see that their front sail is very easy, and every time it sets, it has a little boof, like just now there'll be a rush of air going down there, and you can actually see it land in the mainsail and push it up a little bit. That's sort of what will get them going eventually.
Now, what a contrast that we're seeing at the moment for the sailors who have just come off leg 5 through the Southern Ocean. Through the Southern Ocean, it was a big breeze. We even had Chinese jibes. We had plenty of capsizes, and as you can see here, this was a reoccurring image every time. Mafre over on their side as much as every single team. An incredible leg to sail in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Southern Ocean is the best and most wild sailing in the world. And, they push these boats incredibly hard down there. And every now and then they bite back like this, and it's and they're sitting out there today. And although they hated this at the time, you'll be sitting out there right now going, God, actually, it's not that bad.
Well, talk me through the process here, because you've sailed through the Southern Ocean yourself. I'm sure you've had your fair share of knockdowns. I hope you don't take that as an insult.
I certainly have.
You're skippering a boat like this. You're responsible for the lives of your entire crew, but at the same time, you're trying to push the boat as hard as possible. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, it goes over on its side. What's the process?
Well, the process is very much as everyone's safe first up, and everyone clipped on. And of course there'll be a call at this point to get everybody up on deck, because you're not going to be able to sort this out with the 4 guys that are there. And you'll have to get the front sails filled up, the boat back on its feet, check for damage, get back on course, and then slowly start getting the sails unfurled and get underway again. So the guys in these conditions, really, if you know this is going to happen, you'll be wet bunking. You'll be sleeping with your clothes on, so that if there is a call like this, you can get up on deck pretty quickly and off you go. I mean, but that being said, there have been times where you've done colossal wipeouts like this, and the boat will pop up and just go tearing off again, and you don't even have a moment to think, God, what the hell just happened? You're sort of like, oh shit, I'm driving again. Well, you got to get it back under control, and off you go. But something that a lot of people don't understand is this sheer magnitude of the responsibility of the skippers and the watch captains on these boats is in the Southern Ocean. You really are pushing super hard, and the harsh reality of it is you are responsible for the lives of those guys on board. And there is a point where you have to say, hey, tonight we're surviving, guys. The sun comes up tomorrow, we're going to push again.
Well, Knut, we're just seeing some images here of some of the dramas that we've seen in the Southern Ocean, and of course Mike Golding, who's with you today. He's a famous solo around the world sailor, but also I remember him in the Southern Ocean rescuing a fellow sailor that was in distress.
Yeah, tell us about that, Mike. What happened?
Yeah, it was in the around alone, and a fellow competitor, Alex Thompson, a British sailor, on a boat, Hugo Boss, suddenly had a problem with the keel head. The keel head of the canting keel snapped, and he was left with the keel swinging wildly beneath the boat, and it started to break through the hull. So he was in a pretty bad situation. I had to turn around, go back to him, and I actually picked him up right in the centre of a storm, but in very light sunny conditions, because I was literally in the eye of the storm. So I found him in the middle of the night. We did a transfer early in the morning, and then got him back to Cape Town. So
amazing story, and you are also one of the very few people in the whole world who has finished a round the world race without a keel. I mean, you lost the keel just before the finish of the Vendée Globe and managed to still stay in 3rd place, finishing without the keel. And you even told me before that you even got protested because someone thought it was illegal to sail without one. But tell me, what actually happened and how did you discover it?
Well, basically, I'm sailing along the last few miles into Les Sables d'Olonne, having sailed 27,000 miles around the world. I've literally got a cup of coffee in my hand. The boat heels over as if there's a gust. I ease the main, and then the boat continues to heel, so I ease the jib, and all of a sudden the boat's on its side, and I don't really understand why. I think there's something gone wrong with the keel hydraulics, but then very quickly I realised the keel had actually snapped. And very quickly I had to work out how I was going to make the finish, which was 90 miles away, with the boat with no keel. And because these boats have dagger boards, it's actually not so difficult. But with the one design, with the Volvo 65 one designs, of course the keels are forged. They're much, much stronger than the keels we were having at that time in open class, which were fabricated keels and much more prone to that sort of failure.
It's an amazing story. I can just imagine that feeling of realizing that the keel is gone, and there's not much you can do.
The worst thing was, you sailed all that distance in the Vendée Globe, you've overcome numerous other challenges, and to think in that last 90 miles I was potentially not going to finish the race, and it's almost an unbelievable situation. And at that point I was vying for second place, and I ended up being third, but I tell you, I was the happiest third place I ever had. I was delighted to be on shore, and it was a bit of an amazing story. And yes, I was protested because technically the boat without its keel is out of class, and so consequently the race committee did protest me. And at first I thought everyone is winding me up and there's no way this is for real, and I was led into a room, and there, sure enough, was the full committee ready to sit and hear this thing. But there was a reason behind that. It sounds crazy, but there is a broader thinking behind that, because while my keel failed 50 miles from land, it could well have failed 500 miles from land. And the question is it safe to allow that competitor to continue sailing in the race? And this has happened, so there's precedent for this. So.
Well, I'm happy for you that you didn't get thrown out after that effort.
A great helicopter shot there, just coming over the trees. And is it me, Richard, or can I just see a little bit of darker patches on the water out towards the right-hand side of the screen? Is that a little bit of breeze, or is it just a bit of current?
Yeah, I don't know. It could be a bit of shadow coming off the clouds, but interestingly enough, in the last shot there, I saw Bow looking over his shoulder in that direction, so he's got a nose for finding a nice little puff. But I think there is a little bit of pressure moving across the racetrack there. I think Alpha Medica have actually tacked over onto port, and they're going out there having a look for it as well. But there's definitely an effect here of current coming out of that river as well, so that's what we could be seeing on the surface of the water. But beyond that, further north, it's looking pretty glassy. Not a lot of breeze there.
Team SCA head out on starboard tack to look for breeze. Charlie Enright, the young American, leads Alvi Medica out to the right-hand side of the course, looking for breeze on the opposite side. So two skippers, very different ways to attack this race course. Down towards the back, it's good to see Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing closing up, but out in front, Alvi Medica and Team SCA are starting to stretch their way from the rest of the fleet. So not a lot of breeze, but just enough that some of the teams are making use of it.
Yeah, it's just every single little bit you get, it's going to help you just inch your way forward. Once you get moving forward, you've got that all magical apparent wind speed, which will allow you to keep going for just that little bit longer. It's actually tougher to sail downwind in these conditions than it is upwind, because as you get the wind and you move towards it, of course, it has an amplifying effect. Sailing downwind, when you're sailing away from the wind in super light airs, the faster you go, the faster you move away from it. So it's a very fine balance. So much more difficult to sail downwind than upwind here. And you can see these guys are working pretty hard here to keep the boat going. Ryan Houston down to leeward there, trimming away. They must be thinking about shifting over to a code zero here, maybe. No, they're just trying to get the sails to set.
I think they've just tacked over again, because when we saw them previously, they were on port tack. Now they're just tacking over onto starboard tack. Will Oxley, the navigator on board the boat, very much the father figure on board that boat, being made to work on the pumps. That's potentially a little bit cruel. They wouldn't ask me to do it, but maybe he's just spent a bit more time in the gym. But when we look at these sails here, I mean, these are pretty heavy-duty sails. They're not light. When they're down on the deck, it takes a couple of people to lift them. So as the breeze gets light like this, and there's no pressure in the cloth, it just hangs down, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And of course, these are all one-design sails, and they're designed to get around the world, so there's a lot of safety factor built in them. If this was in the Mediterranean and you were sailing your TP52s, well, you'd actually have a specialist light airs mainsail that you would be using that day. So you'd look at your weather forecast and it'll be a much lighter, fuller sail that you would put on. Whereas these boats, the sails have to go from a range of absolutely no wind we're seeing today and survive near storm conditions, which requires a lot of strength. So you give up a lot of light airs performance in boats like this, and particularly with your sails. But of course, they get you around the world.
Well, I was talking to Mark Towell from Alvi Medica before, and he was telling me that the new Volvo 65, it's a great boat. They might have lost a little bit of performance compared to the 70s, but what they've lost, they've gained in strength. And the point that he put in front of me was, this is a boat that's designed to go round the world and dealing with 50 knots and huge waves, not once, but twice. This boat is going to be used for the next edition as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been quite a few discussions here in Itajaí about the next edition of the race and what changes may be made to the boats. But I think the discussions of those discussions were that not much. There's not the focus really needs to remain a lot on the racing that's going on and these phenomenal finishing times that we're getting. So they'll probably all see pretty big refits and what have you. But the sportive outcome of this has been fantastic. It's quite important to sort of see that this it's not so much of a development class it used to be in the past. But the focus is very much on the sailing side and the sportive side.
Now, I want to get some information from you that I have been dying to ask, because one of the things that we've seen as we pulled in here to Brazil is the jury have had to come in and make some decisions. And of course, they made a decision against Team SCA with one of their sails. And for those people that don't quite understand with the Volvo Ocean Race, it's one design this year. Everybody gets the same deal. Everybody starts off with the same package. And the sails are a very important factor of that. You can start the race with 7 sails, a full set, plus a few spares.
Plus 4 extra. And that's the only sails you're allowed to use around the world. Now, all of these sails came off the same molds to the extent where prior to the team, so we ordered them all at the same time. And so, so there was seven jibs that were J1s that were built. Well, nobody knew whose was whose until those sails had been finished. And each sail was given a number, and then they were allocated out of a hat. So there's been a lot of gone to great lengths to ensure that there's no way that the sails can vary. But that being said, there's only 11 sails to use to get around the world. So you have one full set. You're only allowed to use one mainsail, and you're allowed to, of your remaining sails, which is the 3 head sails and the downwind sails, which is there's 4. You're allowed to choose. You have to decide which of those 4 sails you're going to have 2 of, and you can use all those on the way around the world. But if you break both those sails, then you have to go to the jury. So in our situation with the Fro, it was badly destroyed, and we have a pre-race Fro which has been used for a year, so it's not in great shape at all. But that was what we were trying to do with the jury, was to be able to use that sail as a backup. But that's the jury's decision. They deemed that we could repair our Fro, so we've done the very best we can to repair that, and that sail is now back on board for this leg. But Dongfeng have been in a situation. There's been a few other appeals, but the crux of the whole thing is that you only have 11 sails to get around the world with.
Just to clear up a little bit of Volvo Ocean Race slang, Fro, that phrase has been thrown around quite a lot. The sail you're talking about is the fractional code 0. 2 code 0s that you have in your inventory, one that flies from the masthead and one that flies a little way down. So it's kind of like your heavy weather reaching sail.
Exactly. It's not a really curly haircut. It's it's your fractional reaching sail, which you use a lot in the Southern Ocean. The ranges of these sails are quite interesting, because at code 0 you can use them very light airs, but you'll also use it in 25 knots or over going downwind. Same with the Fro, you can actually use that for sailing upwind in lighter airs, and you'll use it in very heavy airs downwind and also reaching.
Well, talking of heavy airs, talking of the Southern Ocean, which has really been, a lot of these sailors so glad to leave these big breezes behind, and these boats start sailing into waters that big ships that rarely go into these seas, rarely cross these oceans. So this has been an opportunity to do some research, and the boats all carried research buoys on leg 5, which they dropped into the Southern Ocean.
We're into the Southern Ocean. We're at 40-43 south, and each of the boats in the Volvo fleet's been given a drifter buoy to deploy.
No, they know very little about this part of the world, so they're trying to get as much information as they can from the Volvo fleet. We're some of the only idiots in the world to come down and hang out down here.
So still light winds out on the course, but Alvi Medica, they are leading this fleet at the moment. They've obviously found a little bit of breeze, and great to see Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing closing up to Dongfeng Race Team. These 2 teams at the back of the fleet at the moment are at the front of the leaderboard overall. So Charles Quadrelia doesn't want to let Ian Walker out of his sight, and now he starts leg 6 right beside each other.
No, these two won't be letting themselves out of sight for right all the way to Gothenburg. I don't think it's going to be all on It's still looking extremely light out there. It'd be interesting to see if Alpha Medica have managed to make a gain by trying to push out into that little bit of pressure that they think they saw out on the right-hand side there.
Yeah, Team SEA still out of your picture to the right-hand side, but Alvi Medica on top of Mafre, Team Brunel beneath them.
This is really interesting to see what's happening out there, because you've got two boats pointing the same direction on opposite tack. So you've got Brunel on port tack and you've got Alpha Medica on starboard pointed at the same direction. So that really is a sign that the breeze has no consistency whatsoever out there.
Well, let's get Canute in on this. So how's the breeze situation out on the course, Canute?
Well, we are close to the top mark where they're going to run, and I can tell you there is a little bit of breeze there. What I'm seeing on Alvi Medica, Mapfre and Brunel is that the angle they put the bow on the waves is actually almost having a bigger impact. So if you're trying to point too high, you get these waves pushing your lee bow, so on the opposite side of the wind, and it pushes the bow around, and you get almost forced into attack. So you have to be very careful and find that right angle. So it's not only about where the wind's coming from, it's really these big waves have such a big impact on the boat moving. But right now I'm just keeping my finger up in the air, and I can feel there is a little bit of breeze, and it's coming from the south. So you wouldn't want to be where SEA is right now, because the wind is up here and the wind is where Alvi Medica is. And Mapfre has done a fantastic comeback. I mean, they have just slowly sailed through the whole fleet here and are now up to second. And no, there is breeze on the top mark, and I know the race committee has been discussing whether they will shorten this last lap. You know, there's first a sausage and then there's a triangle, and that depends obviously what's going to happen in the next minutes or so, and what we're seeing on the wind sort of after the top mark, because they may do that. To just let them off a little bit and not go back and forth in no wind. But at the moment, a little bit of breeze coming. I'm a bit surprised by that maneuver by Brunel, because there's nothing on the other boats that points towards having the breeze from the east.
And Canute, just to be clear here, it's not like the import race where this race will get scrubbed and abandoned and restarted later. This is the offshore race. This will carry on. If these boats sit here, they're going to have to struggle out of these light winds.
Absolutely. I mean, this race cannot be shortened anyway. I mean, what we're talking about is these first 2 laps they are doing here for the public. But the race will not be cancelled. And if they sit there tomorrow, they sit there tomorrow. And that has happened before in offshore racing.
Well, there's a little bit of breeze just coming down from some of those darker clouds. It looked like Alvi Medica first to get it. Team Brunel, from that sort of half tack that they did moments ago, seemed to be getting closed into Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing and Dongfeng. Dongfeng just struggling there as Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing recovers from a horrendous start for leg 6 and now rolls over the top. And in fact, I'm seeing water here brushing past their bow. They're actually moving forward.
Yeah, they're getting forward slowly there, and I just saw on Team Brunel there, they actually had to drop the jib to get the head of the jib to clear around the front of the mast. So they actually had to drop it down and get the battens to clear over and get on the other tack.
And one thing about this venue is the swell. It's light winds, but we still have a strong swell, and that makes it so much harder.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard enough to sail these conditions in dead flat water, but you know, when you've got a lot of boats bobbing up and down there, and they're bobbing up and down quite a lot, you know, it's again, you know, you're losing that flow over the rudders and over the sails, and it's just very tricky. But funnily enough, looking at Abu Dhabi there, they look very settled. You know, the boat's not moving around too much, and I'm not seeing the luff, which is the front of the J1, pumping too much. So that means it's setting most of the time. Phil Harmer, he'll be working hard on that jib sheet. It's a pretty handy trimmer, that boy. He knows how to trim a hedge, so they'll get along nicely.
And we've mentioned this before, but Ian Walker, this is his third Volvo Ocean Race campaign. He did Green Dragon back in 2008, and then he took control of Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, and he has been trying desperately to get onto the top of the Volvo Ocean Race. And now, potentially this edition, I mean, he's certainly in a good place at the moment, but of course, we've seen teams at this halfway stage leading, and then they've just slipped right away from the results.
Well, it's a classic one with Telefonica in the last race. You know, they just completely dominated in the first part of the race, and then you know, things sort of just didn't work out for them. It just got progressively worse, you know, as the race went on, and you saw Groupama going the other way on the curve and getting stronger and stronger and stronger, which is it's such an important facet of this race. But they're getting along pretty nicely there, Abu Dhabi.
Well, the double British Olympic medalist there, he's just rolling over the top of Team Brunel, bow backing left, floundering with no wind. Ian Walker and his boat finding a little bit of breeze. They're actually going quite nicely.
Yeah, they're slipping through the water nicely, but yeah, of course in this one, we start talking about manoeuvres here, you will not want to tack unless you absolutely have to tack. So any manoeuvre will just kill the speed completely.
Well, the leaders have really closed up to Mark 1. I mean, this is a slow race, but the last time we checked in on the distance, it was around 700 metres. Now it's down to 300. Alvi Medica and Mafre managing to go over the top of Team SEA, and they are closing in on the top mark. There it is in the middle of your screens, about 300 metres to go. And if they can hold on to this little bit of breeze that you can just see on the water around them, Alvi Medica and Mafre could clear the top mark and potentially sail clear.
Yeah, very good shot there. You can see that tiny little dark patch around Alpha Medica. Believe it or not, that's what they're sailing at the moment. You look over to Team SCA, very glassy, but that puff will move from the left hand to the right hand side of the screen. So eventually SCA will get a little bit of that, but that's a very, what we'd say, private breeze. That's just for Mafre and Alpha Medica at the moment.
But the big thing is, the big change that we're seeing here, they've got those J1s up. Alvi Medica had the code 0 earlier. They've elected now to follow the rest of the fleet and go with the J1, and those sails are starting to set. Even with this swell coming in, they're not losing too much shape.
Well, because they're that much smaller, they can sort of just pump and set, whereas the code zeros will entangle the rig, and they're so big and that there's just not enough wind to blow them full.
Well, Canute, we're seeing Alvi Medica and Mafre. They look like they're going nicely. Well, Canute, we're going to come back to you in just a moment. Alvi Medica, now I can see their speed on the virtual eye. It's ticking up to almost around about 2 knots. Sure, some of that's going to be a little bit of tide just coming out of the river, but as soon as a little bit of pace comes on these boats, just a little bit of speed, everything comes alive.
Yeah, well, these boats normally go up when the target boat speeds of around 10.6, 10.6 or 10.7, and all of a sudden you're here doing 1 or 2 knots. So when you eventually do get these boats up to speed in a couple of days' time and doing 10.5 knots going up, when it'll feel like you're sailing in a hurricane.
Now, one thing that I'm seeing here is Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, just as the shot showed their bow a moment ago, they had the J1 up, the code 0 was down on the deck. We saw them earlier packing it down, getting it out of the wind. With some of the other teams, Team SEA that were on the screen a moment ago, they have their code 0 still up and filled. There you can see the bow, all the crew sat on the bow, that code 0 down on the deck, out of the breeze. Surely it's better to drop it and get it out of the wind.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got a big cylinder sitting in front of the boat there, which is disturbing all the wind that's coming over your sails. So that creates a big turbulence. So you want to get that down and get all the drag out of your rig profile. So you want everything down and clean. So whatever's coming onto the boat is you can use it as much as you can. See, old Capey sitting up on the foredeck there, looks like he's enjoying himself.
Well, now I'm going to put you on the spot here, Richard, because Team Brunel, who were doing reasonably well in this race, they got off the line quite cleanly. Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing got off the race terribly, and now the situations are completely reversed. Bow Becking, we can see on the helm, he doesn't look like he's having a very good day. The jib doesn't know what side of the boat it wants to set on. Was that luck, or was that judgment on the part of Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing?
Well, I think it's luck. I think it's just he's obviously he got it into a mode. He might have got a puff to get going and get himself out of trouble there. But of course, he's it's all about sailing. But I just wonder if Bauer's seen something out on that side. He obviously did the same thing yesterday. He liked that right hand side. He invested in it heavily to get there, and that eventually he got a puff off this corner up here. You can see on the right hand side of your screen, and was able to use that to get back. But right about now, he's almost sailing away from the top mark. So if he's going out that way, there's definitely something out there he likes. But Alpha Medica and Mafre closing in on the top mark.
Looking good at the top of the course. The breeze is just giving these two boats enough to get moving. Alvi Medica, sail set, the top of the jib just struggling, but there's enough flow that they're starting to move. Mafre behind them, working quite hard not to slip into the bad air of the Turkish and American team. But if things stay the way they are, Charlie Enright, the 30-year-old American, is going to lead his boat round the top mark. And this race to Newport, this is a very important leg for Alvi Medica.
Absolutely. And interesting you're talking about Ian with his 3 races here. He's risen. Green Dragon was a tough campaign for him. The last campaign was very tough for him as well, but all that is built him up into this race where he's got a formula where he's been able to exert dominance on the fleet. And a telling thing was at the end of the last leg, they're workless. They hadn't broken anything significant on board the boat at all. So not only had they sailed through the Southern Ocean in leading form, but they'd managed to manage the boat in such a manner that they hadn't damaged everything, and that's very telling of a boat that's at the front of the fleet. I was having a chat to Charlie on the dock this morning, and you could see, we're hoping for a better result. There's frustration. Well, really they're doing an extremely good job. They're showing signs of brilliance, and it's their first crack at it. And you'll never ever be in the Volvo Ocean race and expect to win it your first time round. It takes time to get it good at this. Going around the next mark, I think they've got to leave this to port, have they?
They've got to leave this to port, and as we can just see, the breeze is just starting to shut down, and the boats are starting to drift a little bit sideways on the current. And if they drift to the right-hand side of this mark as we see it now, they are going to be in real trouble, because then they're going to have to tack to get round this buoy. And in this breeze, tacking, it's almost impossible. It's almost not a manoeuvre that you have in the toolbox.
Well, it's pretty brutal. You just have to put the helm over and hope for best, and you've got to use the keel to actually help rotate the boat through. But these waves, and you can see that they're just struggling to get it going. They're going more and more sideways there, and as this sort of happens, it become more and more difficult for Mafre to get through Alpha Medica.
Well, it looks like Mafre are set to go underneath Alvi Medica, and in fact, as you can see on the horizon, there's a little bit of smoke arriving from the city of Itajaí, and you can see it's going pretty much straight up, so there isn't much breeze over there to come onto the racecourse. Mafre now, they are going to leeward of Alvi Medica, and while that might give them a moment's gain, then they're going to have to tack to get around that top mark, and then they're going to just stop still.
Yeah, it's going to be gut-wrenching to try and get the boat moving again. It's you're really just going to have to sail up to the mark as close as you can and see what happens when you get there. You wouldn't want to tack this far out and then be forced to tack again and again. Just sail the shortest distance to the mark is the key here.
And this is the worst time for the leaders here. Charlie Enright on board Alvi Medica, who's done all this work. He's picked out just the faintest of breeze, found the smallest amount of speed, got his way all the way to the top. He's barely 100 meters from the mark, and now he's stopped dead.
Yeah, these guys will be, their minds will be wandering over to the Southern Ocean pretty soon, I think, about roaring along at 35 knots of boat speed. They'll certainly be happy boys when they finally get their noses into those easterly trades in a couple of days' time.
And you can see the difference on board that boat. The sails, they're not setting at all. They're really flapping around. And out on the virtual eye on the right-hand side of your screen, Team SCA, they really plugged on out to that side. Now, if they could tack over, they might be able to come round to that mark and do quite well. They have to round Mark 1 to port. They have to put it on their left-hand side of the boat and go round that buoy. And at the moment, all three of these top teams, Team SCA, Mafre and Alvi Medica, are on the wrong side of that mark.
Yeah, I don't know how you manage this. You're really just going to be trying to find something to be able to carry that manoeuvre out and head over towards the top mark. It's really important to note here that if this was any other sailing event in the world, apart from an offshore sailing event, if this was the America's Cup, TP52 event, the AP would be up and everyone would be in the yacht club drinking coffee. The Volvo Ocean Race, what makes it significant is you've got to sail in all conditions. You have to sail in no wind, you have to sail in hurricanes, you have to survive, and that's what sets this event out from anything else. And that's why Volvo Ocean Race sailors are always very welcome in these other teams, because they really can sail in absolutely anything.
And we're not quite at the extreme of light winds yet. There's just enough to give us some hope. But if it really was completely glassy and strong tide going in the wrong direction, we might see some sailors putting the anchors down.
Well, you could well do, and that has happened before. That in the old days where they used to finish the Whitbread race in Southampton, they would come in the Needles and boats would actually have to anchor for 3 or 4 hours to sail the last mile and a half to the finish, while everyone else is on the dock partying, and you can hear it.
Well, as we're waiting for these top 3 boats to close into Mark 1, Canute, I understand you've got some important news for us.
Yes, I have. The race committee has decided to basically send them straight to Newport, and they're just going to round this first mark, just round the first mark, leave that mark as planned, and then they are free to sail to Newport instead of going back to the start and basically spending hours drifting here in no wind. So that's quite a radical change, but basically they will leave the first mark and then go straight to Newport.
So as they round this mark, we're going to start seeing the jumpers coming off the back of these boats. It's going to be pretty cold in that water.
It's not too bad. I had my hands in there earlier today. It's quite warm.
Well, Canute, I'm just wondering which one of these boats do you think is going to make it first? Alvi Medica's out there, Mafre's out there, Team SCA, are they all informed of this change?
No, I think, yeah, they're all informed. So the race committee has been speaking to each boat individually on the VHF radio, and they will also have the change sent to them in text, in writing, and they have it all confirmed with all the boats. So I think Alvi Medica is looking in the best place here to get around that top mark first. They are clearly almost sort of halfway to the mark from Mapfre, so looks in good shape, but there's still not a lot of wind here. There's a little bit of pressure, and you can at least feel the wind is coming from somewhere, Mike, and it's quite painful.
Yeah, it's very painful, but all the teams will be pretty happy with that news of getting on the way to Newport. I think no one wants to do another couple of turns of this, so I think that will go down really well with the teams, whether they're at the front or whether they're at the back. Everyone just wants to get going. But now the big problem is any manoeuvre with the boat, you're seeing the sails actually inverting, and they're having a big problem to get the sails to take on the right shape because of the battens in the mainsail. When they do have to manoeuvre and change the sides with the wind, they'll have a big problem getting the shape in the sail, and that pretty much stops the boat.
Exactly, so anything can still happen here on the first mark, and obviously what this means also is that whoever gets around that top mark now is the first boat to head offshore, and that can be a big gain. I mean, it's there's nothing here on the water, there's nothing in the next 2-3 miles from the mark, but you know, we know somewhere out there is a new system and there's more pressure.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think you are seeing boats ostensibly tacking. We're looking at Mapfre now, just manoeuvring into a tack. Some of the boats haven't been tacking, they've just been tacked by a change of wind direction, and so these are very difficult and testing conditions, but we're just looking at Mapfre just setting up onto port.
Well, Canute, I'm just wondering, we've got a driftathon at the moment, but we are waiting for some breeze to come in. What exactly are we in store in the next 24 hours?
Well, there is supposed to be more pressure offshore, but it's not a very strong system. You know, there is nothing in the next hours. And I spoke to some of the sailors on the dock, and typically those who are experienced sailing along the Brazilian coast know that along this coast there is a huge difference nighttime and daytime. And my experience in this race, when you have raced here, is that the biggest gains and losses are all very often made at night here. Because daytime you can see each other, you can see everything that's happening, and it's normally quite easy conditions. However, in the middle of the night, you have these big rain clouds and squalls, lightning, you have storms, and it very often happens at nighttime due to the temperature difference and the humidity and everything that's happening with the local geographic weather. So I know the guys will be focusing a lot on the night and the night sailing, because that's really where a lot is going to happen until they leave the Brazilian coast and get closer to the Caribbean.
Yeah, well, actually, to sort of move that further on, we've been through this affair, but there's the easterly trade winds, which is what you're really fighting for. You want to get your nose out into those. That's going to be the first major goal of the next 48 hours, and then it's going to be into sort of nicer trade winds as you scoot forward.
Well, after an agonising first leg here on the import section of leg 6, Alvi Medica finally reaches the last mark. This will be the final moment for the import section. Mafre hot on their heels, the rest of the fleet floundering.
Yeah, absolutely. You look back there at Dongfeng in the background there, they're looking very, very light. And you see Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, they're heading off 50 degrees lower than these guys trying to get around the mark.
Well, this is a great start for Alvi Medica. This is a team that they are the young team. You know, Mark Towell and Charlie Enright, when they founded this team 10 years ago, now they're in their 30s, early 30s, very, very low on experience. However, they have been improving. They led around Cape Horn. Now they're leading off from Brazil. They're going to sail into their home waters, and you don't get a special bonus for winning in your hometown, but there's something nice about it.
Oh, there's something very, very nice about leading into your hometown. I was my first race over I had the great fortune of being able to come into Auckland in first position on Asa Abloy, and that was one of the most memorable times in my career in the Volvo Ocean race. It was sort of one of those days where, like, well, what do I do now? You know, it was so these guys will have this in their minds as they head off. And I think the fact that these guys are no longer experienced, I'd say that they're becoming very experienced. They're becoming super experienced 30-year-olds. They're delivering a great campaign all around. These guys are doing a very good job.
Well, Alvi Medica and Mafre just finding a little bit of breeze, and on the left-hand side of your screen you can see the Spanish boat backing the J1, backing the jib over to help the boat tack. So there is some pressure out there. They obviously feel that manoeuvre is going to work for them, and these two boats are now sailing clear of the leaving mark.
Yeah, well, basically these guys are moving twice as fast as they were half an hour ago. So you know, they've got something to work with. They'll be greatly relieved, and as they move out offshore, they should just slowly start getting into more and more breeze. You can see as you're looking towards the shore there, it's just a glass off. There's nothing there. All the little smoke telltales, you often use that as a sailor. You're looking for any sign you can find on the shore, what's going on in there, and it's moving straight up. So the game's all offshore at the moment, I think.
Well, Canute, you're on the water, and I'm just wondering, what's the breeze like in front of Alvi Medica? Are they going to be chasing something, or is it just heading straight along the rum line?
Well, I can tell you there's a lot of helicopters here, and that's helping them right now. And the interesting thing is that the two leg jumpers on Alvi Medica, they're still on board, and I can see the umpires are trying to tell them, do you want to jump? Do you want to jump? You know, we'll pick you up. And they better jump. I still remember in 93 we were leaving Fremantle, and I think it was Chris Dixon in Tokyo. They had a cameraman on board, and he suddenly changed his mind. He didn't want to jump, and they were leaving the coast. And Fremantle is known for all these great white sharks, and this guy was hesitating and hesitating and hesitating. In the end, he sort of got the survival suit and was left with a flare and had to jump. So I can see them now. They're just deciding, oh, I better jump. Suddenly I'm going to be in Newport, and I can see these two guys in Alvi Medica is getting ready for it.
There on the back of Alvi Medica, the jumper is indeed getting ready. Now, Alvi Medica do a rather special situation with their jumper. They actually auction off their jump seat, and all the proceeds go to a heart charity that they're taking with them around the world on the Volvo Ocean Race. And this person who's jumping off now, Tulio Hochkopler, he won this seat here in Brazil, and all of the proceeds will go to charity. So potentially not a sailor, we don't know, but he's all on camera now. Fairly safe entry into the water there. You know, he did that well. Hopefully the life jacket inflates, and there's the umpires to pick him up out of the water. But as you were saying, not too cold today?
Not too bad. I'll give him a 5 out of 10 for that entry. It wasn't that spectacular, but safe all the same. You know, it's all about the splash.
Well, I was walking around the dock earlier. There was talk of some of the jumpers today. There was a bit of boasting going on. Some were saying they're going to do backflips. Some were saying they're going to jump in various different ways. So hopefully we'll see some people really putting some courage into their jumps.
Yeah, I mean, for people, you have to understand, for a lot of these people, that they're not particularly used to this environment, so it's quite a terrifying thing to launch them off the back of a boat. And we've seen a few go off. There's all interesting cross coming here between SCA and Abu Dhabi.
And
so
good speed on top of FCA here. We've got 5 knots of speed, so that breeze that just pulled Alvi Medica and Mafre round the top of the mark, that might be blowing down now. Might start to see on the rest of the fleet. Team SCA up at around 5 knots, potentially. Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing a little bit slower, but this could be the start of the wind.
Yeah, I think it's starting to. There was definitely something we could see in the last shot there, pushing in on the racetrack there. Maybe it's just going to start slowly fingering in from offshore. You know, there's sort of the snippets of these easterlies coming in. It is forecast to go a little bit more north later on. And as they get away from here, there's a cold front. They're just about to see another jumper go. Let's see how he goes here.
He's going off the top of the stanchion here. 1 foot ready.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great effort. That's what we like to see.
Bomb one.
Yeah,
10
that's
out of 10.
commitment
Yeah, that
to
was
the
good.
jump there.
Perfect. Well done.
Oh, and smiles. He's happy. He's obviously not too cold. That's good to see.
Super. That'll. I'm sure that story's going to get talked up over the next couple of days.
So Alvi Medica now, they are ready. They have got rid of all their guest seats on board. They're ready to go, continue on their way to Newport. Now we follow Team SCA, where their guest is getting ready to jump. And Richard is a rather famous person here.
Yes, yeah, famous actor here from Brazil, and I think we'll see one of our boats come up alongside pretty soon to come and retrieve her out of the water. She had a long chat with her on the dock this morning. She was quite keen to identify who it was that was actually going to rescue her from these waters out here.
Another jumper just getting ready here on board Mafre, the Spanish boat. They've safely gone round the leaving mark. Team SCA, they're getting ready, but they haven't yet rounded that last mark. Now what you can see on your screens there is the cameras and the gears just getting put onto the guest. The onboard reporter just giving a few little tapes, bits of footage, and that's going to come up into the editing suite. He's trying to hold it out of the water, but hopefully it's waterproof. I think he's got a GoPro there with him. And there he is getting picked out of the water.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Quite interesting to see how the boats are, if there's any extending going on here as the boats move out. You can see that Alpha Medica and Mafra just starting to inch their way out, and it looks like SCA may be struggling to lay the mark there. They need to get up a little bit just to get around that one. It'd be brutal to have to do another tack going around there.
The speeds are a little bit better at the moment. Alvi Medica 2 knots, Mafra 2 knots. We are seeing boats now steadily above 2 knots, whereas before, I mean, at times we were seeing minus numbers.
Yeah, it looks like it's a little bit easier to be on port tack at the moment than starboard, and I think it's just a function of the swell direction there, as we mentioned earlier. It's just helping the boats along.
Well, that's Alan Jabor on the back of Team SEA getting ready to jump. That boat's eking its way up to the top mark, and once they round that top mark, she will then jump off the back. Behind them, Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing now up to speed, being chased by Dongfeng Race Team and Bauer Becking taking Team Brunel back into the race. And if Dongfeng Race Team park up here, we could have another port starboard.
Yeah, I think it should be an easy cross here, but again, you have to really think ahead. Like, you've got to be thinking 5 minutes ahead. If you're going to start clearing a boat, you're going to have to start doing that manoeuvre very early, otherwise you can end up in trouble. But you see the boat just inching its way there towards the mark. And of course, you don't want to get too close to it in these conditions, because a wave could actually wash you onto the mark. If you touch the mark, you have to do a 360-degree penalty turn, which could take a long time in these conditions.
And that would just destroy your race in this light winds. And Team SEA at the moment, I'm just looking at the front of the J1, the luff, and I'm just looking to see it starting to flap, and there it goes. So they really are losing breeze. As soon as that J1 stops setting, then you know they're in trouble. And in fact, I can see the crew on board the boat starting to make their way back. Maybe they're getting set up for attack.
Yeah, there's certainly some talk here of a manoeuvre coming on by the looks in the middle. Yes, they're loading the runner, so they've decided that they're not going to be able to lay that, and they're going to have to tack away and get enough distance to be able to clear their way around the mark and not get washed onto it.
And Carolyn Brow on the back of the boat there, helming. You can just see her hand go down to the keel controls just to swing it over, and that is how close they've come to rounding Mark 1. But unfortunately, they've just had to do attack. And what do you think attack costs you in these conditions? 30 seconds, a minute?
Oh, and it's at the moment the other boats are sailing at 2 knots straight at Newport, and you've had to tack and you're sailing away from it. I mean, they have to tack. They can't take the risk on getting too close to that mark. You've got to get the boat up to speed and get it going again. But you look at the angles of Mafra and Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing at the moment. They're sort of being forced to sail away from the mark as well. Here goes Abu Dhabi. They think they're on ley line, so they're tacking through. So potential situation coming up here with a port and starboard.
Well, this is very interesting here, because we had a port and starboard yesterday with Team SEA. Canute, it would look like we're going to have a port starboard at the top mark, maybe.
We certainly do, and the key thing here is that SEA needs to complete their tack here. They need to definitely get across, and that's challenging when they're not moving. They had a very, very slow maneuver. They're slow into the tack. And as long as they can manage to complete that tack, they're fine. But right now, I think Abu Dhabi is actually going to try to sneak inside SEA. And that's very possible, because SEA doesn't have any boat speed. So as long as Abu Dhabi keep moving, they will make it and make it on the inside. But it's tricky, and I can see that there is more breeze here now. I mean, Brunel had pretty good pace with their big code 0. So the wind is filling in a little bit. There's a little bit more breeze than we have seen ever since the start. But very tricky for the girls on SEA right now. Two tight maneuvers is not going to make it. And Abu Dhabi here is going close to the mark. That is also equally dangerous, because if they lose the steering speed, they can very quickly drift onto the mark. So they're very, very close, I would say. I think Ian Walker is cutting it thin here, because the current is also pushing him slightly towards the mark. So he has to be very, very careful, and he's coming up to take some extra pointing, but he should be clear. He has some speed in the boat.
Well, we're seeing on the screens at the moment just how close Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing are to that mark. They're on the inside of Team SEA. There's the shot that we want, maybe 3 meters clear. So he judged that one just about right.
Yeah, there's a few mark roundings that have gone into getting that one right. You see he sort of swung his stern up round the apex of the mark and got himself clear. And I think at the same time he's maybe just cleared his air underneath the Team SCA there, so he'll sort of move around underneath them and work up to their line. But both boats are now clear of the mark and on their way to Newport, so it looks like SCA are starting to get underway. Jumper's just about to go.
Well, and this is why you've got someone like Ian Walker leading the Volvo Ocean Race in this edition. He started this leg right back, he had to sail clear back round again to clear the line, and now he's caught his way up and he's chasing down third place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic case. I mean, you'd be furious with himself after that start. He's got his game back together, he's back up into third. That's what it's all about. Consistency is going to win you this race. It's a long regatta.
Well, Ellen Jabor on the back of Team SCA gets ready to jump. She's got the dry bag around her neck with all the essentials from the boat. And it's quite a big jump from that windward side. The boat's not heeling over that far, but that's pretty good going.
Seems to be enjoying herself there. See you later, girls. Very welcome retrieval from the coaches, I'm sure.
And she looked pretty confident in the water as well. She was jumping in there in a bikini, pretty much in swimwear, and she's clearly a local. She knows that water's not going to be too cold. I wouldn't have that much bravery.
No, it's Brad Jackson and Yoka giving her a hand there. There's the two Team SCA coaches helping her there into the coach boat.
Well, now we can see Ian Walker looking over his shoulder, just trying to work out exactly what's going on. In fact, actually, he's waving goodbye to Dom Jolly, British comedian and journalist. He's been on board the boat today, and in fact, earlier on, he climbed the mast as well. So is he potentially stalling there a little bit? Maybe doesn't want to get into the cold water. Getting himself up onto the side. That's a difficult step up.
The old Englishmen, they're always a bit scared of the water,
And that's a good jump as well. A little bit of a belly first into the water, but the life jacket lifts him up, and there he is, perfectly happy.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably cracked a few funnies before he went off the back there. See you later, lads.
So Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing and Team SCA, all the jumpers now off the boat, and those two teams on their way, chasing down Mafre and Team Alvi Medica. Still to come, we've got Dongfeng Race Team and Team Brunel to get around that last clearing mark. Dongfeng Race Team under a boat length to go, but it's Bauer Becking who's really suffered on this first part of leg 6. He had a reasonable start, but then the breeze just didn't go his way.
No, he obviously went out into having a look to see if he could find what he found yesterday, and it just wasn't there for him, so he's probably had to sail that extra distance and suffered a little bit for it, but all be told, I mean, the whole fleet's going to be within a mile of one another, so it's all to be played for. And I'm sure there'll be a couple of restarts tonight. There's the guys trying to look out to sea here at the moment. You can see there's a few patches of breeze starting to touch out on the surface, but also some very lighter glass areas there. So they'll just be playing this from one puff to the next as they've got to fight their way north but east because there's actually a cold front coming up from behind these guys, so they're going to want to be staying ahead of that, and you sort of want to get east into the pressure, but you can't just go east, you've got to go north. So there's going to be a little bit of balancing of finding your way into that new pressure. You can see looking offshore here that in front of them by these two ships is looking pretty light as the fleet exits out.
Well, Canute, we're just waiting for Mauricio Santos, the Brazilian football player, to jump off the back of Dongfeng Race Team. And this, the jumpers on board this boat, this really is a wonderful opportunity, isn't it, Canute, to experience Grand Prix racing right from on board?
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think obviously it would be nice with a little bit more wind when for these guys who are sports, famous sports athletes in Brazil. But for sure, it's a new experience for them, and all of them. I mean, ever since we started doing this a couple of years ago, I've had an amazing experience, and I think Zinedine Zidane, the famous footballer in France, told me that it was one of the most remarkable things he had ever experienced, and he will never forget it. So here comes another one.
Well, jumping off the back of Dongfeng Race Team is Mauricio Santos. A great jump there. This is a Brazilian football player who won the World Cup in USA '94. In fact, it was a goal scorer in the game. So a very famous player in Brazil, and hopefully he's given Dongfeng Race Team a little bit of a push, because this is a team that needs to pick up a little bit of momentum. They were absolutely on fire in the first half of this Volvo Ocean Race, and then losing their mast on leg 5, we really want to see them regain their form.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they sort of were the underdogs, so to speak, and they very much became the team to watch. And there's been a lot of rumours around the race village about them having a little extra turn of speed with the boat. A lot of head scratching as to why, but of course it's they suffered a breakage from here. But we'll see the character of the crew as they pick themselves up and how they perform in this next leg.
Well, if you've just joined us, we are now on our way on leg 6. The import section of leg 6 has been shortened. We've completed that. We are round the leaving mark, and Alvi Medica leads the fleet out on their way to Newport. 5,000 nautical miles to go. A very light wind start, very challenging start, and it's going to be a very difficult first 24 hours for the tacticians and the navigators to try and find the best breeze. They've got to make their way out from Itajaí and then on to Cabo Frio. That's going to be the first cape that they've got to go around. A 400 nautical mile dash across this bay. Difficult. What kind of manoeuvres are we going to be expecting from these boats? Are they going to stay into the coast or head out to the sea?
Well, it's quite interesting because it's as Knut was saying there, there'll be some guys that'll be looking the coastal passage. This could be a time where we actually see splits, where there's a difference in theory and you want to push out and try and get into the easterly trade, the edge of those trade winds. Versus there's always a zone in between, which is not much wind, so you won't be on the shore.
Well, let's take a little bit of a look in a bit more detail at the weather that we're going to be expecting for the first 24, 48 hours on this leg. There's the bay that you can see heading their way out to Cabo Frio, and they're going to have this light breeze pushing them up, but then just on top of that cape you can see how the breeze just shuts down. The two winds opposing each other, and there isn't really a lot there.
No, there isn't, and in sort of these areas where the arrows get smaller and what have you, that means there's no wind there, and you can see these easterly trade winds where they push into the coast here, but generally it's very tight reaching and on the wind all the way up to the corner of Brazil here, where you actually go past the same turning marks that we had in the first leg going to Cape Town, and then it starts getting freer and freer, and you reach your way across the Caribbean. And then it's up sort of through that Bermuda Triangle area and into the colder waters of up the Gulf Stream and then into Newport. So.
And of course, that's the forecast, and what you were describing there, that's the sort of standard pattern. But there's a lot more local effects that come into play. We've got sea breezes as the sun comes up, heats the land, and we get this big thermal draw. And then, of course, night breezes where the reverse happens. And how much pressure is there on the navigators to try and second guess what's happening?
There's a lot of pressure because, as we've seen with some of the weather forecasting here over the last couple of days, I mean, it's so much a local effect that you can't use. Sometimes you can't use what we call high resolution weather models to tell you what's going to happen. In the America's Cup, we do end up with these sorts of tools that will tell you almost down to the minute what's going to happen with the wind over a 2-hour period. They're very accurate forecasts, and you can use these to identify trends in the wind and shifts left and right. Whereas out here, it's so localised, and there's generally not huge amounts of weather information on these parts of the world that you really have to trust your gut instincts as a navigator.
And it's that uncertainty that seems to be leading to a bit of a characteristic of this edition. It's very, very tight, and the boats are a little bit afraid to split from each other. They carry on board AIS, an automatic identification system, and as long as they're close to each other, there's ways that you can tell what the other teams are doing. So it is going to be another very, very tight race. It's going to be a very difficult leg, and there's not an awful lot for these teams to try and pick out. We're going to see them pretty bunched together.
Yeah, we certainly are. I mean, this AIS is a bit like a rubber band that seems to keep the fleet together and stop them from splitting. And of course, now that the points are getting closer and closer, you're going to be more and more reluctant to take your eyes off the guy that you're closest to. You're going to want to be sticking with them, covering them, making sure that you've got a handle on him, or you're controlling him in some way. So it's going to force you to stay closer.
Well, as we are about to finish our broadcast over in Alicante in Raich HQ, they are setting up to cover the race. Jenny Tulloch is going to bring you all the action as this leg develops.
Now that the sailors are on their way on the more than 5,000-mile journey north to Newport, Volvo Ocean Race Control in the headquarters here in Alicante, Spain is fully up and running. Duty officers and watch producers ready to work 24/7 to monitor the fleet and to work with the onboard reporters to bring you the media from off the boats. The comms team will be pushing that media out on social, online, and on the app. And of course, you can join me, Jenny Tulloch, Monday to Friday at 5 p.m. for the Inside Track with all the latest insider info and updates on the fleet. See you tomorrow, 5 p.m.
Well, the easiest way to get all the drama and inside knowledge is to download the Volvo Ocean Race app. It puts the race right in your pocket, giving you all the action from this leg. Well, Knut, you're on the water. Just wondering, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm just with Albimerica here, and they're sailing into a bit of breeze. There's definitely a breeze on the water, and yeah, so this is going to be they're going to be stretching. This is very much the rubber band, so we can see that the two first boats are going to sail away from the guys behind them, at least in the beginning here. But it's a long way. I mean, 5,000 miles is a lot of miles, and but very good start, obviously, for the young guys in Albimerica, and who are hoping to be leaders into Newport. But final words for me will be that, you know, we have had one of the best stopovers I think we have seen in the history of this race in Itajaí. Amazing amount of people coming in through the village every day, and an atmosphere that you don't see very often. I mean, it's really been an amazing stopover. So thank you to Itajaí and to everyone who has made it happen.
Well, thanks very much to Knut, Mike and Richard for joining me for commentary today. It's been light winds, but it's certainly been very, very tight racing. In 18 days' time, we're going to arrive in Newport, Rhode Island, where the race will continue. Will Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing still top the leaderboard, or will the rest of the fleet be able to close up? Thanks to everybody here joining me today. We hope to see you again in Newport.
City and the passion they have for this race, so very exciting stuff.